Hi, this is Miss Cairo here. This is lesson 4-7, part 2, and we're continuing with looking at shifting pattern and solving when we're multiplying and both factors are decimals. So I'm on page 139. Please have that open and ready. Get your place value chart out and ready as well. And the first thing that we're going to do on page 39, there's a little bit of space in your book off to the side at the very top. I'm going to review with you what the pattern is that we have been looking at for the last two lessons. And it occurs when, again, we have one factor or both factors having decimals. So remember the academic language that goes along with multiplication is a factor times a factor equals a product. So let's write that out nice and small. Factor times factor. Oops, I don't like the way mine looks. Factor times factor equals product. Okay, do you have that written off to the side in your book? And remember, the rule is that the total number of decimals, so we're going to put a number sign here, number of decimal places for both of our factors. So if both factors have decimal places, we count each of them and then we add them together. And that needs to be the same as the number of decimal places in our product. So equal to number of decimal places. And that again is in our product. Factor times factor equals product. Number of decimal places in both of these has to be the same for the number of decimal places over here. And that brings us to the question on page, again, 139. Once you have this in, I'm going to read it out loud. It says, how could you express the generalization about the number of decimal places in the product when you multiply a decimal number by another decimal number? Is it the same as the generalization for multiplying a decimal number by a whole number? It is the same generalization. It's the same rule. So whether our factor is a whole number times a decimal or a decimal times a decimal, the number of decimal places over here has to be the same amount of decimal places over here. So let's type in that rule one last time. You have written this sentence in your book twice now. This is going to be a third time. The more we write it, the better it will get stuck in our head. The more places you will have to look back to refer to as you're completing these problems. So here's the rule. The number of places, the number of decimal places in the product, let me make this a little smaller, is the same as the total number of decimal places in the factors. And is this the same generalization when we multiply by whole numbers? Yes. That was a two-part question. You know, that's probably really small for you guys to see. Let me make it a little bigger. I apologize. Okay, hopefully that's a little easier. And I'll repeat it one more time. The number of decimal places in the product is the same as the total number of decimal places in the factors. You also have this statement written in on the previous page for numbers 33 and 29. We have it now in 3 different places in our books. Super important rule. And the key word here too is total number of decimal places in the factors. Remember, you have to count if there's a decimal here and a decimal there, you have to count both of them and then add them together. We'll get more practice in today. Okay, so that's the rule that we've been working with. We've also been working with our shifting patterns. Um, and number 35 is going to go along with some place value chart work, so get that ready. And it's a little complicated. I'm just going to warn you now. So let me read it out loud and then I will walk you through it. It says to multiply by 2/10 or 200ths, you could think of 2/10 as 2 times 1/10 and 200ths as 2 times 100th. And the reason why we're going to be looking at 2/10 as two wholes or 200ths as two wholes and then multiplying by their place value is because we can use our place value chart to solve these. So remember, we can use our place value chart for shifting our digits when we're multiplying by 1/10 or 100th or even 1,000ths or even 10 or 100 and 1,000. Those are our base tens. So if we wanted to use our place value chart, for example, 2/10 times 4/10, well, I can't use my shifting pattern just yet because 2/10 and 400ths, those aren't base 10 numbers. These are, okay? But we can rearrange some numbers and some place values to have 1/10 or 100th in our multiplication problems for us to use our place value chart. So for example, for 2/10 times 4/10, there's an equal sign, and in parentheses, we have 2 times blank. Well, what they're asking is 2 times, 2 times what equals 2/10. What can I multiply here? So I see we're going from a larger number to a smaller number. This number needs to be less than 1. Well, 2 times 1 equals 2, but plus 1 decimal, that means 1 decimal needs to be in our answer, 1/10. Okay, so in the blank here, let's put 1/10. And again, it's because 2 times 1/10 is equal to 2/10. How we could have also figured that out is 2 is in the tenths place value. And anytime you are trying to break apart the place values, you multiply the digit times its place value. So 2/10, our tenth place value represents 1/10. So 2 times 1/10 equals 2/10. Okay, and then it continues on times 4/10. How do we get 4/10? They just brought that factor over there. Now we have 3 factors in our multiplication problem. 2 times 1/10 times 4/10. Okay, and the parentheses change because our focus is going to change here. So now we have our whole number out of here. So the 2 is out. And now we have 1/10 times 4/10. 1/10 times 4/10 we can solve by using our place value chart. I have 1/10 here, that's a base 10. And then 4/10 is the other factor. So we're going to place 4/10 in our first row just like that. Go ahead and do that with me. We know when we multiply a number times 1/10, how many place values do we shift in which direction? To the right and 1 place value. So the 4 is going to go from the tenths to the hundredths. We're going to fill in our zeros all the way to our 1 spot since that's our only digit. And we have 400ths. The book already gave us that. So using a shift pattern, we got 400ths. And now we have a multiplication sentence that has a whole number times a decimal. And we know to ignore the decimal and the zeros. So we have 2 times 4, which is equal to 8. So let's put 8 in our answer. I'm going to move it over here a little because our next step is going to be counting how many decimal places. How many decimal places are there in our factors? 1, 2. 2 decimal places over here. So how many decimal places for our product? 2. Starting with the digit 8, how do we turn 8 into a number with 2 decimal places? We're going to add another 0 because 1, and I have no other digits, so I'm going to work my way to the left. I'm trying to go this direction in order to find a decimal place, so I'm going to add a 0. There's 2 decimal places now, and then our decimal goes in front with a 0 to represent that this number is less than 1 whole, and we have 8/10 as our answer. Whew, that's a lot of work. I told you it was kind of complicated. Next one, let me keep on walking you through it. This should be a little maybe easier for you to follow along. Now instead of 2/10, we have 200ths times 4/10. We're going to use the same process here, except we're working with an additional decimal place. Oh, I shouldn't have erased that, but oh well. So 200ths times 4/10. Again, 2 times what gives us 200ths? What place value is the 2 in? The hundredths. Remember, we can use our place value chart and our place value understanding. Anytime I have a digit and I'm multiplying it by its whole number, we can multiply its place value in order to get that number. So 2 times 100th is equal to 200ths. That is true. And then they have times 4/10 again. And then we break it apart. Now we have three factors. 2 times 100th times 4/10. We're going to shift our focus over to what's 100th times 4/10. Again, we can use our place value shifting up here. Since we're multiplying by a base 10, we can write our other factor, 4/10, in the first row, and we're going to shift the digits. How many times 4 times 100th? 2 times to the right. 1, 2, and the 4 lands in what place value? The thousandths. We add in our zeros all the way to the ones, and we're left with 100th times 4/10 is equal to 4 thousandths. And now we're ready to solve that whole number 2. What is 2 times 4 thousandths? Well, 2 times 4, ignoring the decimals and the zeros, is 8. I'm going to put my 8 all the way over here, and you'll see why in a moment. How many decimal places are there in our factors? Well, we only have one decimal number here, so let's count. How many decimal places are there in 4 thousandths? 1, 2, 3. How many decimal places does there need to be in our product? 3. But I only have one digit here, so I'm going to underline the 8, and I'm going to work my way over to a decimal. And in order to keep on adding our place values, I'm going to underline 2 other spots and place a 0 in each of them. And then place a decimal before. And now we have 8 thousandths. How many decimal places? 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Same number of decimal places. Is your generalization about the number of decimal places in the product still true? 2 decimal places, 2 decimal places. 3 decimal places, 3 decimal places. Oh yeah. Yes. Thanks for following along. Let's continue down the page.